Lyra, the young alien princess, stood in the grand hall of her father's palace, her heart heavy with failure. The weight of her crown felt heavier than it ever had before. She had been raised to unite the various factions of her planet, to be a ruler who could bring peace to the divided lands. But in the end, she had failed. The factions remained in conflict, and now her people were angry. The trust they had placed in her was gone. Her father, King Dorian, stood before her, his face stern. His voice was cold and unforgiving as he spoke. "Lyra, you failed us. You failed your people. As the heir to the throne, your responsibility was clear, to bring peace, to unite us. And yet you did nothing." Lyra's eyes lowered to the floor. She could not look her father in the eye. She had tried, but the different factions were too strong, too divided. Every attempt she made to bring them together ended in failure. They rejected her, insulted her ideas, turned their backs on the future she hoped to create. "I am sorry, father," she said softly, her voice trembling. "I did my best, but they wouldn't listen." No one listened. King Dorian's expression hardened. "Your best was not enough. There is no place for failure in this kingdom. I cannot afford to let your mistakes ruin everything we've worked for." Lyra swallowed hard, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to spill from her eyes. She had always tried to be the perfect princess, the one who could fix everything. But now her failure felt like a weight too heavy to carry. Her father's words felt like a final judgment. She had let him down. "The council has spoken," King Dorian continued. "You are hereby exiled. You will leave the palace and go into hiding. You will no longer be my heir." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. Exiled. She had failed, but she'd never imagined this. To be cast out, to be nothing more than a forgotten princess. She had always been told she was destined for greatness, but now she felt like a shadow of who she was supposed to be. Her father's eyes softened for a brief moment. "I do this not out of hatred, but out of necessity. Perhaps you will find the strength you need away from the palace, away from the pressure of the crown." Lyra didn't know what to say. Her heart ached with the reality of what she had just heard. She had never imagined that her life would take such a turn. Her whole world was crumbling around her, and she was powerless to stop it. King Dorian turned and left without another word, leaving Lyra standing alone in the cold hall. The echoes of his footsteps faded, and the silence seemed to swallow her whole. Hours later, Lyra stood at the edge of the palace, staring out over the vast, desolate landscape. The sun had just set, casting long shadows across the valley below. The sky, once bright and full of hope, now seemed dark and heavy, just like her heart. She was alone now, exiled from the only place she had ever known. Her guards had packed her things, prepared a small ship for her escape. It was a small, humble vessel, nothing like the grand ships of the royal fleet. As she walked toward it, she glanced back at the towering palace, the place where she had grown up, where she had learned the ways of the court, the place where she had once believed that she could change the world. Now it seemed like a distant memory. Lyra stepped into the ship, her heart sinking. She had no idea where she was going. All she knew was that she had to leave, to disappear from the public eye and find some way to redeem herself. But how could she redeem herself when she had already lost everything? As the ship lifted off the ground, Lyra's thoughts wandered. She had failed her people, failed her father, and failed herself. She had never imagined that her journey would lead to this exiled alone and without a future. Her hands gripped the controls, but her mind was elsewhere. Lost in the weight of her failure, the ship flew through the darkening sky, carrying her farther and farther from the kingdom she had once dreamed of leading. Lyra didn't know where she was going, but she knew that she had to find a way to make things right. She had to find a way to fix the mistakes she had made, even if it meant doing it on her own. As the hours passed, the stars began to fill the sky, twinkling brightly. Against the blackness of space, the vastness of the universe seemed so endless, so empty. Lyra felt small and insignificant in it all. Her kingdom, her people, her father, none of them cared about her now. She was just another failure, drifting through the void. But then something changed. A small flicker of hope stirred deep inside her. She didn't know how, but she had to believe that there was still a chance for her. She had to believe that even in the face of failure, there was a way forward. It was then that she noticed something unusual on her radar blip, small and distant. She wasn't sure what it was, but it seemed to be moving in her direction. At first, she dismissed it, thinking it was just a glitch in the system. But as the blip grew larger, she realized that it was another ship, and it was getting closer. Her heart raced as she tried to identify the ship, but the communication systems were down. She had no way to contact it, no way to understand who was coming toward her. Was it a rescue ship? A hunter sent by her father to bring her back? Or something else entirely? As the ship grew closer, Lyra's grip on the controls tightened. She was afraid, but she couldn't turn back now. She had to face whatever was coming. The ship loomed closer, and Lyra's eyes widened in shock. It was unlike any ship she had ever seen before. It was large, but it wasn't royal. It wasn't sleek and polished. This ship looked old, weathered, like it had seen many battles. There was something about it, something that made her feel that this was no ordinary encounter. Something that made her wonder if maybe, just maybe, this was the turning point she had been waiting for. What would happen next? Would this strange new encounter be the beginning of Lyra's redemption? Or would it only add to her long list of failures? Only time would tell. But for the first time in a long while, Lyra felt a spark of hope. Lyra's ship drifted through the vastness of space, the quiet hum of its engines, the only sound in the darkness. She stared out the small window, watching the stars twinkle in the distance. There was a sense of loneliness that hung in the air, the kind that made her heart feel heavy. She had never felt so far from everything she knew: her kingdom, her people, and the life she had been raised to lead. She couldn't understand how everything had gone wrong so quickly. One moment she had been the heir to the throne with all the expectations of her people resting on her shoulders. The next, she was alone, exiled, with nothing but the empty space around her. Lyra's thoughts were interrupted by a beeping sound from her ship's radar. She frowned, glancing at the screen. The strange ship she had seen earlier was still on her path, getting closer. She had tried to ignore it at first, assuming it was just a passing spacecraft. But now it seemed to be following her. Her fingers hovered over the controls as she tried to scan the ship's identity. The ship was old, with scars and dents all over its surface. It didn't look like it belonged to any major fleet. In fact, it looked like it had been through countless battles and had seen much better days. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest. She didn't know whether to be scared or hopeful. Could it be someone sent by her father to bring her back? Or was it something else entirely? She didn't have answers, and the uncertainty made her feel even more vulnerable. The ship moved steadily, closer, its lights flickering in the distance. As it came into view, Lyra could make out a large, shadowy figure at its front, but she couldn't identify it from this distance. She wasn't sure what to do. Should she try to communicate with them? They would leave her alone? Her thoughts were cut short when a voice suddenly crackled through her communication system. "Unidentified vessel. This is Captain Orion of the ship Phoenix. Please identify yourself." Lyra's hand trembled as she reached for the controls. She had no idea who this Captain Orion was, but she knew one thing for sure: he wasn't from her planet. Her father's ships had a distinct design, and this was nothing like them. She took a deep breath, her voice soft but clear as she responded. "This is Princess Lyra of the Zerathian Empire. I'm in exile." There was a brief silence on the other end, followed by a crackling noise. Then, Captain Orion's voice came back calm and steady. "Princess Lyra, we've been tracking you. You're far from home? Are you in need of assistance?" Lyra's heart skipped a beat. This stranger, whoever he was, seemed to know more about her situation than she had realized. She wasn't sure if she should trust him, but something in his voice told her that he wasn't trying to harm her. I don't know, I'm just lost," Lyra admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. She couldn't believe she had said it out loud, but it was true. She had no destination, no purpose, and no idea where she was going. She just wanted to escape her past. The captain's voice softened. "We'll guide you to a safe place. You don't have to be alone in this." Lyra blinked in surprise. She had never expected kindness from a stranger, let alone someone from a ship that seemed so far removed from her royal world. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I don't know how to repay you." "You don't have to repay us, Captain," Orion replied. "You just have to trust us." Trust. It was a word Lyra had heard many times before, but it felt different now. She had trusted her people, her father, and look where that had gotten her. But this was different. Captain Orion wasn't asking for anything from her. He was offering help. She looked at the radar screen once more. The Phoenix was getting closer, its lights now shining brightly against the dark backdrop of space. Lyra had a choice to make. She could continue on her own, or she could accept the help being offered to her. The decision felt heavy, but in her heart, Lyra knew that this was the right choice. She couldn't do it alone anymore. "I'll accept your help," Lyra said, her voice firm with resolve. The ship Phoenix slowly pulled alongside her vessel, and Lyra felt a sense of calm wash over her. She wasn't sure what would happen next, but she was no longer alone. The next few hours were spent in quiet conversation as Captain Orion's crew guided Lyra's ship into their docking bay. They didn't ask many questions, respecting her. Silence. But Lyra could feel their eyes on her, and she knew they were curious. Who was this princess, exiled and alone? What had happened to her, and what was her future? As her ship docked, a small hatch opened, and a figure stepped out to greet her. It was a man, tall with short dark hair and an air of quiet authority. He wore a simple military-style uniform that was worn but practical. Lyra could tell immediately that he wasn't a man of wealth or luxury. From hard work, he wasn't like the royalty she had known. He extended a hand to her, his expression serious but not unkind. "I'm Captain Orion," he said, his voice steady. "Welcome aboard the Phoenix." Lyra hesitated for a moment before shaking his hand. She wasn't used to such simplicity, but there was something about Captain Orion that made her feel safe. He wasn't offering her false promises or pretending to know everything. He was just offering her a place, a chance to start over. "I'm Lyra," she replied softly. "Thank you for helping me." Captain Orion nodded. "You're welcome. Come, we'll get you settled." As they walked into the ship, Lyra couldn't help but notice the difference between this vessel and the one she had known. It wasn't fancy or full of grandeur, but it was strong. It had been through battles, through hardship, and yet it still stood. There was something about that gave Lyra hope. As they walked through the ship, Lyra felt like a stranger in it, a new world. She didn't know what her future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she had a chance to rebuild. And maybe, just maybe, this strange new journey could be the start of something better. The days aboard the Phoenix were quiet, yet Lyra felt a strange sense of peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. The ship, though not grand, felt like a safe haven, a place where no one expected anything from her, where she could simply breathe. She spent most of her time in the small quarters they had given her, looking out the window at the stars and thinking. The vastness of space was humbling, reminding her that there was so much more to the universe than her failed mission, her past life, and her family's kingdom. Captain Orion and his crew were kind but distant. They treated her like a guest, not a princess, and that suited Lyra just fine. She wasn't sure how to be a princess anymore. The thought of her royal title felt like a burden she wasn't ready to carry. In the days that followed, she learned more about the crew. They were a group of people who had all seen their own hardships, each one with a story of loss, struggle, or survival. It was clear that this wasn't a crew of high-ranking officials or wealthy elites. They were just ordinary people making their way in the universe. One afternoon, as Lyra sat in the common area of the ship, reading through an old book she had found in the ship's library, a voice interrupted her thoughts. "Princess, Lyra, may I join you?" Captain Orion stood in the doorway, his usual calm demeanor softened by a hint of curiosity. Lyra looked up and smiled faintly. "Of course, Captain." He took a seat across from her, his gaze drifting to the book in her hands. "I see you've found something to read." I'm trying, Lyra replied, closing the book and setting it aside. I didn't have much time for things like this before. It's strange not having a kingdom to manage, no politics to think about. You've lived a life many can't even imagine, Orion said, his tone thoughtful. But now you're free of all that. Lyra's smile faded. I don't feel free. Orion's eyes softened. You've just been thrown into a new world. It takes time to adjust. You don't have to have everything figured out right away. Lyra sighed, leaning back in her chair. I never thought it would end like this. Exiled, alone, I thought. I was supposed to be someone important, someone who could fix everything. Orion nodded slowly. We all think we're meant for something big, but sometimes our purpose isn't what we expect. It's not about being someone important to others. It's about finding your own way, even when everything seems lost. Lyra didn't say anything for a moment. His words struck something deep inside her, but she wasn't sure she could fully believe them yet. She had always been told that her purpose was to rule, to bring peace to her people. Without that, what was left of her? I don't know who I am anymore, she admitted quietly. You're Lyra. That's all you need to be, Orion said simply. She looked at him, her eyes searching his face for any hint of insincerity, but all she found was genuine kindness. It was the first time in a long while that someone had spoken to her like this, like she mattered. It's like she wasn't just the daughter of a king. Lyra wasn't sure how to respond, so she remained silent, lost in her thoughts. Orion sat with her for a while, allowing the silence to stretch between them comfortably. It wasn't uncomfortable, though. It was the kind of silence that allowed room for reflection, for understanding, without the pressure of words. Over the next few days, Lyra began to spend more time with the crew. She learned that each one had their own unique story. There was Jace, the engineer, who had lost his home in a war with an alien race. Mira, the medic, who had once been a soldier before. The horrors of battle had driven her to heal rather than harm. And Rin, the navigator, who had once worked in a royal fleet just like Lyra's, but had left after witnessing the corruption in the system. They weren't perfect, they weren't rich or powerful, but they were real, and they had all found a way to survive. Lyra found comfort in their stories, realizing that her past didn't define her future. These people had survived loss, exile, and hardship. If they could keep going, maybe she could too one evening. While walking through the halls of the ship, Lyra overheard a conversation between Captain Orion and Rin. They were talking in hushed tones, but Lyra, with her enhanced hearing, could make out some of the words. She's been through so much, Rin said. She won't open up, though. I don't think she even knows who she is anymore. I know, Orion replied. But we can't push her. She'll come around when she's ready. Just keep giving her space. Lyra felt a pang in her chest. They were talking about her. She wasn't surprised. They must have all been wondering why she was so closed off. She couldn't help it. She'd spent her entire life trying to meet others' expectations.
Oh.
She didn't know what to expect of herself that night. Lyra sat alone in her quarters, staring out the window at the endless stretch of space. The stars seemed so far away, and yet, in their vastness, they felt oddly comforting. Maybe there was a place for her out there, somewhere. Maybe she didn't need to be the ruler. She had always thought she was meant to be. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Come in, she called out. To her surprise, Captain Orion stepped inside, holding a small tray with a steaming cup of tea. I thought you might like this, he said, setting the tray down on the table beside her. Lyra smiled softly. Thank you. I didn't know you were... into tea. Orion shrugged. Not really. But I thought you might. B. Lyra picked up the cup, feeling its warmth spread through her hands. It was a small gesture, but it made her feel less alone in the world. You've been kind to me, she said quietly. I don't know how to repay you. Orion sat down across from her. You don't have to repay me, Lyra, but if you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here. Lyra looked at him, her heart heavy with gratitude. She had been so used to carrying everything on her own, but maybe it was time to let someone else in. Maybe it was time to trust again. Thank you, Orion, she said softly. Maybe I will talk to you someday. Orion gave her a reassuring smile. I'll be here when you're ready. Lyra took a sip of the tea, feeling a sense of calm she hadn't known in years. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could start over. The future was uncertain, but it was hers to shape. And that thought, however small, made her feel like she had a place in the universe once again. Days passed aboard the Phoenix, and Lyra began to feel more at home with Captain Orion and the crew. The fear and confusion that had once clouded her mind began to fade, replaced by a sense of purpose she hadn't known in years. She spent her time helping the crew with simple tasks, learning new skills, and, most importantly, gaining confidence in herself. She had been a princess, yes, but that didn't define her. She was learning that who she was, without the weight of royal duty, was enough. One afternoon, as Lyra sat in the common area, going over some maps of the galaxy, she felt a strange sensation, an unease in the pit of her stomach. She couldn't explain it, but something was off. Her gaze flicked to the window. The stars were beautiful, as always, but today they seemed too far away, too cold. The ship, usually steady and calm, felt different. She shook the feeling away and turned her attention back to the maps, but the unease lingered. She couldn't put her finger on it, but it gnawed at her. That evening, Captain Orion called a meeting in the ship's briefing room. Lyra joined the crew, sensing something was different. The usual banter and friendly chatter were gone. Instead, there was tension in the air, something unspoken that everyone could feel. Everyone. "Take a seat," Orion said, his voice calm but firm. "We have a situation." Lyra's heart skipped a beat. She had never seen Orion like this. The captain was usually composed, always in control, but tonight, his eyes held a hint of worry. "I received a transmission," he continued. "It's from the Zorathian Empire. They know where we are, and they're coming." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. The Zorathian Empire, her father's kingdom, who's coming? Lyra asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "An assassin," Orion said quietly, "sent to find you." Lyra felt her blood run cold. Her father had exiled her, but he had also made it clear that he would never let her go without punishment. If she was to be found, there was only one reason her father wanted to bring her back, dead or alive. "Why would they send an assassin?" Lyra asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Why not just send a ship to bring me back?" Orion looked at her with a solemn expression. "Because you failed, princess. Because they think you're a threat. If they capture you, your father will make sure you never return to the throne, and they won't stop until they find you." Lyra's mind raced. I had hoped to escape her. Past, to disappear and start over. But it seemed that no matter how far she ran, her father's reach would always follow her. The cold reality of her situation was sinking in. She wasn't just a runaway princess. She was a target. "What can we do?" "Rin," the navigator asked. "We're outnumbered. The assassin is trained and dangerous. If they find us, we won't stand a chance." Orion didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at Lyra, his eyes filled with understanding. "Fight. We don't have much choice." Lyra swallowed hard, the fear she had pushed aside now rising to the surface. "I can't go back," she said, her voice shaky. "I can't face my father again. I've already failed him." "You're not going back," Orion reassured her. "We won't let that happen." For the first time, Lyra saw the full force of Orion's determination. This wasn't just about protecting her. This was about protecting all of them. The crew had no reason to risk their lives for a princess who had nothing to offer them in return. They were doing it anyway. As the hours passed, the tension aboard the ship grew. The crew worked tirelessly, preparing for the inevitable confrontation. Lyra stayed in her quarters, her mind swirling with thoughts of the past and what the future might hold. She couldn't help but wonder if her father had truly given up on her, or if he still wanted to punish her for her failures. Either way, the past was coming for her. There was no escaping it, as the ship sailed through space. Lyra thought of her father's face, the stern look in his eyes when he had banished her, the disappointment that had filled his voice. She had failed him, but in her heart, she had always believed that there was more to her than what he had seen. She had always hoped that one day he would see that she wasn't just a tool for his kingdom. She was more than that. But that day had not come. And now it seemed that she would never get the chance to prove herself. Later that night, as the crew gathered in the common area, Orion called Lyra aside. "I need you to understand something," he said softly, his eyes meeting hers. "You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to fix everything. You've done more than most people could even dream of, just by making it this far." Lyra felt a lump form in her throat. "But I've failed," she said quietly. "Couldn't even save my own kingdom." Orion shook his head. "Not about saving the kingdom. It's about saving yourself and the people around you. You've already proven that you have the strength to keep going. That's what matters." Lyra took a deep breath, her chest tightening with emotion. She had never considered herself strong, never thought she had the power to change anything. But Orion's words planted a seed of doubt in her mind. Maybe she wasn't just a failure. Maybe there was still a chance for her to do something good as the hours passed. The Phoenix neared the location of the Zorothian forces. Lyra couldn't help but wonder what would happen when they finally confronted the assassin. Would she survive? Or would she be dragged back to her father, forced to face the life she had tried so hard to escape? But deep down, Lyra knew that the choice wasn't hers alone. She had a crew of people who believed in her, and that was enough for now. She wasn't ready to give up just yet. The tension aboard the Phoenix had reached its peak. Lyra could feel it, and the air of her crew member was on edge. They had worked tirelessly, preparing for the assassin who would soon come for her. Despite the calm exterior of the ship, Lyra could see the worry in the eyes of the crew. They were determined to protect her, but none of them knew what the assassin was capable of. They had to be ready for anything. Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. She sat alone in her quarters, staring at the stars outside. The window, her thoughts were a whirlpool of doubt and fear. Her father's face haunted her mind. She had failed him, failed her people. But now, the one person she had trusted with everything, the captain, the crew was putting their lives on the line to protect her. For the first time in what felt like forever, she realized she wasn't alone. She had a family here, one that had chosen to stand by her even when she had nothing left to offer. That thought comforted her in ways she hadn't expected. They believed in her. And maybe, just maybe, she could begin to believe in herself too. Captain Orion called a final meeting that night. The Phoenix had just reached the location where the assassin was expected to appear. Lyra walked into the briefing room where the crew was gathered around the table, their faces grim but focused. "We're close," Orion said, looking at Lyra. "The assassin is on a course that will intersect with us within the next few hours. We need to be ready." Lyra nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. The fear she had been pushing away for days was now rushing to the surface, but she didn't show it. She couldn't afford to appear weak. Not now. They were all risking their lives for her. Orion continued. "We've set up traps and defenses, but we don't know exactly what we're dealing with. This assassin is highly skilled. We'll need to stay alert and act quickly when the time comes." Lyra's eyes met Orion's. "I'm ready," she said, though she wasn't sure if she meant it. "I won't run. I can't." Orion gave her a small, approving nod. "We'll face this together. We're in this as a team." For the first time since her exile, Lyra felt a sense of belonging. She wasn't just a princess who had failed. She was part of something bigger now, and maybe that was enough. The hours seemed to stretch on endlessly. Lyra couldn't sleep, her mind racing with thoughts of her father, the assassin, and what might come next. She stayed in the common area, listening to the quiet hum of the ship and trying to calm her nerves. It was then that Jace, the engineer, joined her. "You okay?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. Lyra forced a smile. "I'm fine, just thinking." Jace sat down next to her, looking out the window at the endless stars. "You know, we all have our stories. Some of us have been through hell and back, and we're still standing. You've been through more than most. I've got to say, there's something about you, Lyra. You've got strength. I can see it in the way you handle yourself. I think you're stronger than you give yourself credit for." Lyra blinked, surprised by the kindness in his words. "I don't feel strong." I feel broken. Everyone feels that way sometimes, Jace said with a shrug. But you've come this far. That says something. Lyra didn't know how to respond. For so long, she had seen herself as a failure, as someone who wasn't enough. But now, hearing the words from someone who had no reason to be kind to her, something inside her began to shift. Thanks, Jace, she said quietly. Anytime, he replied, a small grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. We've all got your back, Princess. Don't forget that. As the hours ticked down, the crew readied themselves for the confrontation. The ship was on high alert, and Lyra could feel the tension rising. Everyone was preparing for the worst. But Lyra kept telling herself that they would make it through this. Had to. At that moment, she realized something important. She wasn't just a princess or an heir to a throne. She was Lyra, a woman with her own strength, her own future. Maybe she had failed in the past, but that didn't mean she was done. She could start over. She could fight for herself. The soft beeping of the ship's radar interrupted her thoughts. It was the signal they had been waiting for. The assassin was approaching. Prepare for battle. Orion's voice came through the comms, calm, but urgent. All hands to your stations. Lyra stood, her heart racing in her chest. She could feel the adrenaline surging, pushing away the fear. This wasn't about running anymore. This was about fighting for herself and for the people who had chosen to stand by her. Orion walked toward her, his expression serious. Lyra, stay close. We'll get through this together. She nodded, her resolve strengthening. I'm not going anywhere. The ship shook slightly as the first sign of the assassin's approach appeared on the radar. The crew had prepared everything, setting up defensive measures and traps. The assassin was skilled, but the crew of the Phoenix was prepared for whatever came next. As the battle began, Lyra stayed close to Orion and the crew, doing her part where she could. She felt a mix of fear and excitement. The chaos of the moment reminding her of what it was like to be in control, something she hadn't felt in so long. The ship rocked again, and Lyra held on to the nearest railing to steady herself. The assassin was close, and the crew was doing everything they could to fight back. Finally, after what felt like hours of intense action, the assassin was captured. The crew's quick thinking and the preparations they had made had paid off. The enemy was no longer a threat. As the crew gathered in the common area afterward, Lyra felt an overwhelming sense of relief. They had done it. She had survived. And in that moment, she realized something that made her heart swell with hope. She was no longer just the failed princess. She was a part of something stronger, something more than just her royal title. She was part of a crew that had saved her, and in doing so, had reminded her of the strength she had within herself. Orion walked over to her, a proud smile on his face.
You did good, Lyra. You're stronger than you think.
Lyra smiled, her heart finally feeling lighter than it had in so long. Thank you, she said, her voice steady. For everything. We're family now, Orion said. And family sticks together. Lyra nodded, feeling the weight of his words sink in. She wasn't alone anymore. For the first time in a long time, she believed that she could find her place in the universe once again. The days following the battle were filled with a mix of exhaustion and relief. Lyra sat in the common area of the Phoenix, her hands resting on the table, staring out at the stars. The crew was quiet now, their work done for the moment. They had succeeded in capturing the assassin, and the immediate danger had passed. But Lyra's mind was still racing. The reality of what had happened was beginning to sink in. She had survived. She had fought for herself and for the people who believed in her. But she wasn't sure what came next. What did it mean to survive when you had lost so much? Princess Lyra. A voice broke through her thoughts. It was Captain Orion, standing. At the doorway, he had a concerned look on his face, his usual calm demeanor replaced with something softer. Lyra looked up at him, surprised by the sudden shift in his tone. Captain, what's wrong? Orion stepped into the room, his expression serious. I think it's time we talked about what happens next. Lyra felt a knot form in her stomach. She had been avoiding this conversation, not wanting to face the truth. She had already been exiled from her kingdom. What could be left for her now? I don't know what to do, she admitted, her voice quiet. I don't know who I am anymore. Failed so many people, and I don't think I can go back to my kingdom. It's all ... broken. Orion sat down across from her, his gaze steady. You're not alone in this. You're not the first person to feel lost. We've all been through our own battles. That doesn't mean you're finished. That doesn't mean you can't rebuild. Lyra shook her head. How? How do I rebuild something that's already fallen apart? I was supposed to be a leader, a symbol of hope for my people. But now, I'm just ... nothing. Orion reached across the table, placing a hand gently on hers. You're not nothing, Lyra. You're more than your title. And you're more than your past. You've already shown that you have the strength to keep going. You've fought for your life, and you've found people who care about you. That's something. His words were like a balm to her bruised heart. She had always defined herself by her role as a princess, as the heir to a kingdom. He did that. She wasn't just a failure. She was someone who had fought, who had survived, and who had the power to choose her own future. Don't know if I can face my father again, Lyra said, the doubt still lingering in her voice. Orion's gaze softened. You don't have to face him. You don't have to go back to that life if it's not what you want. But you do need to decide what kind of person you want to be moving forward. You don't need to be a princess to be important. You just need to be true to yourself. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. The idea that she didn't have to return to her father's kingdom was both terrifying and freeing. For so long, she had felt trapped by the weight of her royal duties. But now, the possibility of freedom felt real. She could choose her own path. What if I don't know who I am without the crown? She asked softly. You'll find out, Orion replied, his voice full of conviction. It might take time, but you'll find yourself in ways you never expected. Whatever happens, we'll be here for you. Lyra looked at Orion, feeling something shift inside her. She wasn't sure of everything yet, but she knew one thing for sure. She didn't have to face this alone. She had people who cared about her, people who believed in her, and that, more than anything, was worth fighting for. The next few days were spent in quiet contemplation. Lyra continued to assist the crew, learning new things and finding purpose in the small tasks she took on. She helped with repairs, worked alongside the medics, and spent time getting to know the crew better. Slowly, the fear of her past began to lose its hold on her. The crew, though they had their own stories of struggle and loss, had found a way to live in the present. They didn't dwell on their past mistakes or missed opportunities. They had learned to move forward, and Lyra began to understand that she could do the same. One evening, as Lyra walked through the ship's corridors, she felt a sense of peace that had eluded her for so long. She had no idea what the future would bring, but for the first time in ages, she felt like she was in control of her own life. She didn't need to be a princess to have value. She didn't need her father's approval to be worthy. Lyra paused by the observation deck, looking out at the stars. The galaxy stretched out before her, endless and full of possibility. She had a chance to make her own mark, to create a life that was hers alone. As she stood there, Captain Orion appeared beside her. He didn't say anything at first, just stood next to her, watching the stars. After a moment, he spoke. You've come a long way, Lyra, he said quietly. You've been through a lot, but I think you're ready now. Lyra turned to look at him, the weight of his words settling on her. Ready for what? For whatever comes next, Orion said, his eyes meeting hers. You don't need a kingdom to be a leader. You just need to believe in yourself. What? I think you're starting to do that. A small smile tugged at Lyra's lips. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of hope. She wasn't perfect. She had made mistakes. But she was learning, growing, and finding her own way. Don't know what the future holds, Lyra said softly, but I'm ready to find out. Orion gave her an encouraging smile. I think you're going to do great things, Lyra. As Lyra gazed out at the stars once more, she knew he was right. She wasn't just the failed princess anymore. She was something more.
Damn.
And whatever came next, she was ready to face it.